Welcome everyone to this Conformiq Creator 3.0 release review. My name is Stefan Schulz. I'm the product owner of Creator, and I'm happy to introduce to you here a major new release with a lot of very new and exciting features, and I'm happy for you to join this call. So new in Conformiq Creator 3.0, basically most of the changes you will see have to do with the modeling side. We have extended the accessibility of modeling to various new user groups. We're introducing a few new concepts, and those will be demonstrated during this call. So for example, we have added business activities for modeling user stories. Then also there have been a lot of changes around the decisions, which can now be drawn with multiple outgoing flows and not just one yes outgoing flow. We have added a new feature for modeling external circumstances. This can be used, for example, to model non-functional requirements as part of your functional testing model. There have been some new usability around the calling of subdiagrams, the so-called call action. And of course, one very important thing is that we've extended our drag and drop model creation, which was previously limited to some features, but which is now much more widely available. One second. Okay, of course, after the modeling, also there's the test generation, which goes along with that. So full support and entire pipeline in terms of tracking test targets as well as producing output, and also a few more scripter integrations. So when it comes to modeling, what is now new in 3.0 is, again, the modeling of user stories working in an agile environment is now much more soundly supported. So the interesting part about this type of modeling is that by using business activities, you actually don't need to define any structure diagrams at all, and you gain a lot of speed this way. Even though this is a high level of modeling, we have here even a support for modeling with data, and at the end we can generate test scenarios from such models. But of course, what still works is the conventional way of modeling with Creator, and we provide, of course, ability to mix and match and transition from a business requirement model into a model for generating test scripts. And of course, there's also a couple of features which are actually interesting for any kind of new scenario. So what we will show you in the demo is more or less here how this works with the capture of user stories. You see here these new activities with the double boundaries. These are business activities, and here we have a model also with a new decision node. And here you can see that we can also now have multiple outgoing decision nodes. Again, this will become very clear in my demo very soon. But here we can also see this kind of agile way of working that initially I may not have a lot of information about my feature, how it will actually be implemented in terms of the user interface or other APIs available for testing. So I can start very abstractly and use this for exploring my business requirements, and then go on and refine flow after flow to the actual level where I can actually use activities now and actions and add test data to this model in order to generate executable test scripts. And then quite often we've heard the question from many of our users, can I use this stuff also with existing models? And the answer is of course. And here I will also give you a demo, for example, in our standard simple web application, how we can kind of use these abstract activities to kind of introduce new features gradually, and again, even as part of the kind of models that we use to create with Creator 2. And that's it. So let me get started. So there's Creator 3.0 for you. It still looks very much as in the same as you looked before. Let's create a new project. I create a Conformiq Creator project. Let's call that bank app. Okay. So then let's add a activity diagram. Let's call this bank app as well. Okay, so now we're getting started just as always. Please notice now I still set the main activity diagram as before, And now I can just start composing my model for business activities. So new in Creator 3.0s, we can drag from the sidebar in. We still have, of course, all the other functionality that we can complete. And now we have here a new element, business activity node, where I can, for example, say, okay, I log into my system. And then I can then either choose to drag and drop further nodes in from the sidebar, connect them up, via still all the tools bars work as before. Then let's say I can go and create an account. And maybe I should be able to pay some bills. And here's my first model, right? So now if I just use a little bit help from auto layout, I get here my first model of my bank application, which again could be a first kind of iteration in an agile design flow. And I can go directly from here now, load this model. So then we will get our kind of standard, test targets and even data objects. And then you can generate test cases. And let's even attach here the Excel scripting backend and export test cases. So at this point, obviously, with such an abstract model, we cannot really yet generate executable test cases. But what you will see is that already from something as simple as that, we can have here just some very simple descriptions like login is performed, where the input is valid, login completes with outcome is completed, then we pay some bills, or we can create an account with valid input and see that it completes fine. So this is the very basic, we call that more test scenario than a test script, that we can already generate from this very simple model. So let's look a little bit more into what's actually underneath the canvas. So the properties view, if you focus your view here to the lower right corner. So business activities are a construct here which are fundamentally composed into two pieces. One is so-called business actions. By default, they're empty. And another one is business activity parameters. So by default, actually, when you create such an activity, the system generates for you one input parameter and an output parameter and sets this to valid and completed. You may recall that from our Excel data sheet. And this is just to kind of, from the beginning, kind of get you to understand that there is, these are basically tasks, right, that the system is supposed to do, and that they need to be triggered by something, and they have some kind of a result. Now here, as you may see, for example, you can edit these parameters. They're not fixed. So for example, let's say, well, for login, the input is actually called credentials. I don't yet know even if there's username and password or anything else. Outcome, I can leave like this. And then, for example, you see here now it's been updated. Now credentials are valid, and let's say outcome is success. So now I've just edited what I get by default, but I can also, for example, start and editing now more data and say, for example, well, I have invalid credentials, and then I get the outcome is error, right? And I have now my first cases. Again, as you see, no structure diagram, nothing more to do. I can just, basically directly go into regenerating these tests again. And as you will see, I will now get an additional test, which now will actually cover this invalid case with the error. Okay. So now we have the invalid outcome and the error appearing here, and the other tests are as before. And the same thing you can see when you go, of course, here to the Excel. We have one more test, which actually covers this invalid test case. Okay. So much about the about just working with the very basic, business activities. We call this business activity has implicit business actions, which just are named after the name of the business activity. Now, if you want to get better, for example, you can add here so-called when and then actions, right? So when action, this should look familiar to you people that have been working with Gherkin, right? So you can say when user enters credentials, and then of course we can actually also refer here to our parameter, so which is the credentials, which is the parameter. So now it will put the text instead of this login happens, right? It will say user enters credentials, whatever we have here in our credentials value, it will replace that, valid credentials or invalid credentials. And similarly, we can have kind of verification in the then action application responds with, oh, my English today, okay. So then we responds with, and then we forgot here to add insert the parameter. Here we have the outcome parameter we can reference. And so now I can actually go through, write these actions step by step. I can have multiple when actions, multiple then actions, you know, when followed by when followed by then, anything here goes. And I can extend parameters, but also, for example, you know, maybe in some cases I'm not interested in having any parameter, then I can also remove them. And for example, just add here simply a action when user selects open account, then new account is created, right? So here now, of course, it's harder for me to express now variations. Now I really have here now just one standard way of doing this. But again, this is just the difference. When I use business activity parameters, I can get a lot of flexibility and use, again, a lot of data. So, okay, let's just update this here. Need to remove here my mappings file because we have changed the way how we're rendering these activities. So now we go through and regenerate. Again, now we will see no changes in the tests and no changes in the coverage, but it will just be a pure change in the rendering because I've added only business actions. Okay. Rendering, oops, this was the wrong one, sorry. Test suite. So now you can see is that here we have now the text that we have entered, user enters invalid credentials, application responds to an error. And for those of you who have worked with Creator quite a lot, that should look familiar, right? So this looks actually also like custom actions. So actually, if you will, for those of you who know Creator well, you can think of the business actions being the cousin of the custom action, just much easier to use. And as I will show you in a moment also, you know, this can come in very handy in the current type of modeling we do today and speed up your development. So, okay, let's talk about another concept now. Business activity is done. Let's talk about the decisions. Now, decisions in the beginning look just like they used to look. But in actuality, they have actually changed. So let's again have this case. I have now valid and invalid login, and I want to differentiate around that. So the first thing you need to notice when I select a condition, in there it says here now basis. In all the versions we used to have a condition here. You can still specify conditions as before, but we now allow also specification of a basis cannot only be a condition, but it can be, for example, a field. So if you have your condition, you can select that from here, like an equals condition. Otherwise, for example, we have now these lovely business activity parameters. And for example, here in login, I want to decide based on the credentials what I'm going to do. So right now, I have selected the business activity parameter from login to make this decision. Now I draw the arrow out, and now comes another change. This is now called a case flow instead of the true. And here basically I can now specify, for example, on valid credentials, I want to go out, let's give this a proper name. Valid decision. So, and then what used to be called no is now called else flow. So if there's any other kind of credentials that I may enter, right, then I will go out this flow. So the color code is the same as in previous versions, but the meaning is slightly different. So here actually what we put now in the arc is the actual value we expect this basis to evaluate to. And for example, if I have a condition here, this will have a true or false, you know, if you want to see that the condition holds or not. So now again, I'm done, right? I've again just referenced the business activity parameter, and that's it. So if I now want to again generate tests and render them, we can do that. Now you will see we get more tests because we have a new flow branch here. So we can use event nodes and decision nodes with the parameters. Okay, let's just give this a second. So here we have, okay, we actually do only need 3 tests to do this whole thing. See, so we still have all the coverage as we've had before, and that's basically it. In a moment, I will show you how you specify the regular conditions. One thing you need to understand that if you choose a basis, then this value here can only be one value. It cannot be multiple values, and it needs to be a basic value like a data field and a form or a business parameter or something. So for example, if you know, I get more inventive and add more sets where, for example, I say, well, when Stefan logs in, also that is success, right? So now I have more data, and now I want to say, well, right now when I keep the model this way, it's going to say Stefan is kicked out, but I say he is actually a valid user. So now I need to draw another connector here and basically say here, so if the value is Stefan, I go this way. I can, by the way, also connect this back to here. This is not any issue either. But basically this tells me a specific handling of what I want to do when this business parameter evaluates to Stefan, right? Which is in this case that. Excuse me. Okay. So that basically shows you how this modeling works and what we can now do. So we can have multiple outgoing control flows. These values here don't necessarily have to be good, only it can also lead to bad flows, and else is just a placeholder for anything else that is entered and which is here. So that sums up the decision node for the time being. I will show you in another example soon these as well. And now one thing I wanted to quickly show is like we have some new examples. There are Agile bank application and car booking. Let's take this Agile bank application. So here you will see a very familiar looking model. So that you can just access by double clicking. So it's called Bank Application Sprint 1. It's very similar to what we have just drawn today. So you have just seen how I've actually can create this. So again, it's referring to business activity parameter, and let's say that's our sprint 1. Let's say in the sprint 2 now, I go further, and now actually I now replace this login business activity with a normal activity, which we have, you know, from standard creator usage, while we then add real interface interactions as we know it from our diagram, which we have available for application, right? Once the application exists, I can add these actions. And please note also an interesting feature is now there is a new view here in the bottom called actions, right? So here we have, it's the same actually menu that you see when you click on this one. Here you see it as a pop-up, but also here now we can drag and drop. So we can, for example, you know, click these actions, drag and drop in here and do anything crazy we want. So even composing activities has become much simpler. And here you can also see now the decision has been changed. Instead of using the business parameter that we had before, we're now here using the form, you know, you're using the action results here. We're using the username because right now we have the real API with username and password, and here we're actually accessing the username. And if this is Alexis or Stefan, then we continue. Right. So these are the changes, and this one is simpler. This is, we have just kind of dropped it from our new account page. And this is then in sprint, you know, you can extend it on your own. In sprint 3, you add how you transfer money. In sprint 4, you add how to request loan, and gradually your system becomes complete. And at all times, you can generate tests, export them, right, and do whatever you want with it. So this is the one case which we call agile development. Right now, let's kind of go into this case that I was talking about before. I have my Creator 2 model, and I think the most famous Creator 2 model is the simple web application out there. So let's say I have this model, and I liked what Stefan told me about all these cool new concepts in the latest release. So now let's assume here, for example, this remove item is a feature. So I've been developing my creative feature for test automation and generated tests, and now I have a new requirement where people say, well, we should be able to remove an item. Okay, so what we can do here again is we can just drag this out, create business activity, remove item, right? This of course does not know how to really remove the item in the application, because we of course assume this is not there. So here again, I've made this one little change, everything is valid. This is my normal project. I can generate tests and look into all the features. There's a question actually from the audience, can we have multiple whens and thens? And the answer is yes, you can. So here we can again add just some actions when user clicks. Well, at this point probably don't know, but we can have this at any level of refinement. So we can even say if user clicks remove. So and then we have here the then action is row just from the cart. Okay. And then the question was, can I have multiple then actions? Actually, here there's another one, right? And sun is shining. Well, this we don't need the n, right? For me, actually, it is shining outside. So, and here then you can even, change the order, and even more radical things. You can even make other things. You can make the sun shine in this case. So a lot of flexibility is left here, and you can move it to do this very easily. And again, now, see, if I click now, okay, what I will see is I will have a problem raised for me that says the input parameter of this activity here must be used in the input in order for it to be valid, and this is a requirement that we have. So either you say like, okay, I don't need any input parameter, you can just delete them, or you can insert them as I've showed by inserting the parameter using this button. Again, once I remove the parameters, we're all happy again, and we can generate the test cases. And it will just contain for this one test that removes the button, it will just create these business actions like we have had custom actions in the past. So as an advice for users out there listening who are very heavy users of custom actions, I would suggest that all of you really consider to switch to using business activities. Again, as you can see, a lot easier. There's no need to work with the structure diagram, no extra definitions, no textual rendering, nothing. What you see is what you get, and but still, the thing that business actions will not give you is the ability to generate automatic implementations for that code. So here I cannot generate for you Selenium code to click the item. I need for that really the activities and their actions. Okay, there's a bunch of questions here. Maybe I should take some of them. The parameters don't appear automatically. The first set of parameters appears automatically when I drop this in. So let me just go through this again. Always by default, it will come with an input and an output parameter, but you can remove them, or you can add them, or you can modify them. So that is done, and you may choose to use them. We think it's a good idea to use them because then you can actually work with a lot of data sets and make interesting decisions. So we recommend that you use these parameters, but you don't have to. Okay, so after this now, I want to maybe move on still further. Now that because there's even more things that we have been putting into this release. Now, one of the things is this modeling of, we call that external circumstances. Let me just clean this a little bit up, that there's not so much here. So right now, here's our infamous login example where we're just logging in. Let me just try to lay that out. Okay, not sure if that's much better, but here now we have this thing that we're logging in, and then we decide, is this a valid user, and then we go on. Maybe we get this requirement now that, sorry, let me just do this one more time. Okay, so maybe here we have now this requirement that actually the system can only accept the user login when it is not under severe load. So after we reach 100 users, we can, for example, no longer, the system is overloaded. So this previously was possible to model with custom actions, but again, this has become easier by allowing to make decisions on so-called, let's say, they're called. So if I click here on the basis, there is this new icon here called external circumstance, which is basically an input, or it's like a test precondition is something that influences my functionality that I may not have direct control on over. It's not like clicking a button, but it's some kind of pre-configuration of the system. Somebody pulls the power plug out of my system and the system shuts down. Acts of God, force majeure, we have many names for this kind of effect. But basically, when you select this, at that point, the only thing you need to do now is to say, to connect the flows and basically state here, what is this external circumstance? So there is less than 1,000, okay, 100 users. So only then I check if it's a valid user, but otherwise I just exit too many users, right? So this is the name of my node, but also here I need to still make sure that on that case flow here, I need to say, so here is there's less than 100 users, more than 100 users logged in. Now, of course, I can model this in very many different ways, but it gives me a very quick way to just model this kind of let me just play around with my auto layout here a bit. So it gives me some quick way how I can model this kind of functionality where I have no direct information that I can use necessarily, or may need to prepare something advanced in the system that I test. Sometimes people come to me and say, like, I want to have the test end here right away and not continue in my model, because that's how I want to generate my test cases. We had a case like this yesterday. So this is also something where you can say there's an external circumstance where I, as a tester, say the test should end here because I say so, right? Not because there is a reason that is directly related to input and output. So this again, let's just make this the main activity diagram, load the model. We need to save a model. Then in the conditional branches, you should see, so is the system overloaded? You have these two external circumstances that pop up, and then we can basically generate test cases and see everything else here. It is like a regular standard decision, right? So, the only thing here is that the basis for the decision is the external circumstance, but otherwise it is just working like a regular decision node. It's just a new way of formulating a basis. And again, that can be very powerful and help you out in situations, especially when you write user stories and there's still a lot of unknowns in the equation. Okay, so another thing I can just quickly discuss here is that so far, whenever we have been associating subdiagrams, that has only been possible at the level of the entire activity. But now, with the new version, we have actually a way that we can also have this as an action, right? So that means that you can actually call multiple diagrams from the same activity. So, for example, here I want to, let's just give an artificial example. First, I want to call the login, and then I want to yet login in another way. So of course this is not a realistic example, but now you can mix and match diagram calls together with other actions in these activities, and this can help you also in refactoring existing models a bit more easier than it has before. The one thing we have to watch out for is that when we generate test cases, normally Conformiq always generates test cases that complete the activity. And the cases where there is the call action used, of course, tests may end after, with the invocation of this activity diagram. That's an important little side note you should keep in mind. And that actually matches the current behavior, the way how the previous way has been working, which again, you can still use also the old way of working, which is just to right-click and add a subdiagram and then select the login. And then now you have blocked the whole activity with this call. That is the alternative. Okay, now the final thing from our slides, I don't know if you remember, maybe we should just quickly go back here to this slide, was that, yes, that here we have some new integrations. So there's the Selenium JavaScripter, which uses page object model to generate code. We have had a lot of requests from people to have actually something in addition to the JavaScript. So let's just go there. If you go to the new, you now have a scripting backend. You have here the Selenium JavaScripter. The old Selenium scripter, which is based on an Excel framework, is still there. And then we have also a scripter called the Gherkin scripter. BRM means business requirement models. So we suggest you only use this when you have pure models, business requirement models, such as here this bank application model, only business activities. It will only generate feature files which refer to business actions. All normal actions are for the moment at least ignored. But the more important one here is really the Selenium scripter. So here what happens, again, if we just render these tests that we have just generated about our login. So you will see there's a Selenium Java folder, and within that folder we have actually a page object model where for each screen we generate a class file which in itself then contains the different methods, and already contains the implementations how to call into Java. So a lot of people are again moving to these to this page object model. For them, this may be interesting, at least for an evaluation as to how if they have custom frameworks based on Java and Selenium and TestNG, which this is also a case of. And here the tests are with some utilities. Okay, so that closes the kind of the presentation, what I wanted to cover on 3.0. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for your time and patience. Bye-bye.